Welcome back to another Film Geek movie review. In just a moment, I'm going to be walking my happy butt over to the futon to check out the Hulu original, Nutcrackers. So what's the plot of this movie? Well, it tells a story of a man who's living his best life, I believe, in New York City. And then he finds out that his estranged sibling has passed away, leaving her kids orphans. Well, now, he doesn't want these kids to be orphans, but he doesn't really know them awful well, so he decides to go out to Ohio to their farm and try to find them a good family that they can live with. This movie is directed by David Gordon Green, and it's starring Ben Stiller. And I was thinking just the other day, it's been a while since I've seen Ben Stiller in something, and then all of a sudden this movie popped up, and I'm like, oh, okay. And in all honesty, guys, this looks like your typical, heartwarming holiday dramedy type of film. I mean, just by watching the trailer of this movie, I have a pretty good idea where this movie is going. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. You can still have a, kind of an average story, but then some great acting and some really funny moments that are going to make the film pop a little bit and set it aside from other films similar to this. It almost feels like a Hallmark movie, but instead of the big city girl moving to the country and meeting the man of her dreams, it's, a guy living in the city who goes and meets his nephews, I guess, or nieces or nephews. To be perfectly honest, I didn't really pay too much attention in the trailer. Well, okay, guys, as always, my cat Haku is waiting on me over on the futon, and he gets really tired of me yammering on. Before I get over there, though, I want to have one question answered down in my comments. This is Thanksgiving weekend here in the States, and I'm wondering, how was your Thanksgiving weekend? I had a great time with my family. We got together over at my sister's house, had a bunch of food, turkey, good times, laughs. It was a blast. My aunt and uncle from Florida came up to visit also. It's been a long time since we've seen them, and my uncle has his own little brewery down in Florida, and that's where I got my brew here. This one is a Belgium ale that is known as Trashy Cathy. All of their different brews have a pin-up girl type of thing going on. That's pretty fun stuff, and you know what? Pretty tasty stuff to boot. Well, okay, guys, it's enough of me sitting here yammering on. As I said, Haku is waiting on me, and as we all know, he gets highly impatient waiting on his films. So it's enough of me sitting here jibber-jabbing. It's time for me to head over to the futon and check out Nutcrackers. Getting done watching Nutcrackers, and guys, while I did enjoy this movie, let me put it to you this way. I'm happy this film was on streaming because I don't think I would have liked it this much if I would have seen it in theaters. So let's get this started, shall we? We're going to get things started with negatives, then move into the positives to end the video on the ever so important high note. The first thing I want to talk about is the runtime of this film. Now, while the movie isn't excruciatingly long, it's just a little too long, and it does get a little draggy in spots. The movie checks in at around an hour and 45 minutes, and to be perfectly honest, a good 15 minutes of that runtime could have been shaved off. The other thing about this film, and this is more plays into the pacing, not necessarily the runtime, is the fact that we don't really get into the reason why this movie is called Nutcrackers to begin with until about the last 30 minutes of the film. The film also, even though it's being advertised as a holiday film, I don't feel like this movie had a real strong holiday vibe to it. It doesn't really seem like it starts to pick up onto the whole Christmas thing until, again, the last 30 minutes of the movie, and it really feels like the whole idea was kind of tacked on at the last second. It's like, oh wait, this movie's going to be released around the holidays, well, why don't we make it more of a holiday film? And so then it felt like they might have gone back and done some reshoots or something. Like there's an entire slapstick comedy scene in this film that really felt tacked on. It almost felt like the filmmakers were trying to get into like a Meet the Falkers vibe for some odd reason in this moment to kind of play off of some of Ben Stiller's physical comedy that he used to do in the past. And it really kind of made the film feel kind of weird. It really kind of hurt the pacing a little bit, and it just felt tacked on. And the reason why it felt felt tacked on was up to this point in the film, the holidays have been kind of mentioned, but they really haven't been like really pronounced in the movie. And so then they do this whole holiday scene, wackiness ensues, and it just felt very tacked on in the movie. It just seemed like they were like, oh crap, we need to put in some more holiday stuff to make sure people know this is definitely a Christmas movie because it's coming out at the end of November. It just didn't fit the vibe whatsoever, and even though I did get a couple of chuckles out of the scene, it doesn't really fit the film. Speaking of the chuckles, this movie is not necessarily nearly as funny as I thought it would be, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The trailer does make it feel like it's going to have a lot more slapsticky, goofball comedy attached to it, a lot more comedy of error type stuff, and in reality, a lot of the comedy just comes from the kids and Ben Stiller talking to each other and getting to know each other. There's a whole scene where Ben Stiller is trying to do homeschooling, and it works pretty well with the boys. I had a couple of laughs right in that moment. There's some other parts too where the boys and Ben Stiller again are just talking, and it's just those like, those kids say the darndest thing type of jokes, and I liked that. And I felt that the film, when it tried to go into the more goofball comedy, it didn't work so much with the tone of the film that it was building. It just felt completely out of place and tacked on, and to be perfectly honest, kind of wish they wouldn't even have thrown the scene in there. And Ben Stiller's character, now while I liked his character, it was a little bit different than the character that you think he's going to be playing. Now, as I said in the intro, yes, his character is this guy from the city. It's Chicago, by the way, not New York. New York does get brought up, but anyways, I digress. He's a city guy from Chicago, and he does have a real estate job, and he's pretty well off, blah, 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 blah. But the guy is not necessarily an insensitive jerk. He does try to, work with the boys a little bit, but his character isn't necessarily cold-hearted and hateful or selfish or self-centered. He's mostly a person who's never had any kind of real relationship with anybody. He's like, so he even brings it up. He's like, yeah, I've had like a girlfriend in my life. And he doesn't really have any kind of connections with kids or anything like that. So realistically, he's not necessarily a jerk or selfish. He's just a person being thrown into a situation that he really doesn't know what he's supposed to do or how to act in. And I did like the fact that they made his character like that, because it made it a lot more believable as the film progresses. Because yes, I did predict exactly how this movie was going to end. It does not take a rocket scientist to figure out this movie is going to end the way it does. It is not a complicated story. This is something we've seen before. A family member passes away. The irresponsible member is the only one left to take care of the kids, and they're a fish out of water. Well, he's from the city and they're from the country, and oh no, wackiness ensues. And yeah, those vibes are there, but his character wasn't shallow and mean and awful. He was just more confused and didn't really know what he was doing. And I did like the fact that they played the character in that way. So I don't really think that's necessarily a negative. And so I forgot to announce that I was in the positives. So here we go. We're in the positives. Speaking of the acting, Ben Stiller does a pretty good job in this movie. It was really nice to see him back and not playing the kind of character that I was expecting him to play. I was really expecting him to play a real arrogant, self-centered, selfish asshole in this film, and I also thought the movie was going to rely heavily on slapstick humor by the trailer. And to be perfectly honest, I was happily surprised that I got to see some real acting out of Ben Stiller and not just a bunch of wacky, goofy jokes. There was some very heartfelt, good, solid moments in this movie, and I have to say, guys, all in all, it's not a terrible film. Now, like I said, if I would have seen this film in theaters, I think I would have felt a little bit differently about it, because the story itself isn't very complicated. It's very run-of-the-mill. It's very been there, done that. But the acting and the kids themselves in this movie and the way Ben Stiller pulls it all together, I do think that this film is definitely a decent watch on Hulu if you are a subscriber. I don't think this is necessarily the kind of movie that's going to make people want to pay for the subscription for this, but if you do have the opportunity to get that good old-fashioned free subscription for a little while, and you're curious to see what old Ben Stiller's up to, I think this is a fairly solid movie with some good heartfelt moments, a couple of chuckles, and all in all, guys, just a decent streaming film. So there you have it, guys, my honest opinion of the movie Nutcrackers. So if you liked what you saw here today, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Sorry guys, my voice is kind of losing it. If you liked what you saw here today, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, and give me the old thumbs up so I know you like what you're seeing. And if there's one more thing you can do, folks, that is keep watching movies. You know I'm gonna.